So all, yeah?
Yeah, again, yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to this new video. In today's video, we're gonna talk about Vietnam real estate market in 2022. So this is a big update, and I would like this video to cover all the main topics about macroeconomy, but I will as well more deep inside about the update about the Vietnamese real estate market. I have today Nhan with me to discuss about that. Nhan, can you give us a little bit about your background in the real estate industry in Vietnam?
So it's about me again. I have been working for the real estate industry for a couple of years, and I started my career since 2019 in the Saville as an international real estate consultant. I providing the consultant services for the client, especially the foreign client who is seeking for the real estate investment in this country. And currently, I'm working for another real estate developer, and we focus on mainly on the resort and the hotel development in the moment. And personally, that I also the real estate YouTuber that we're creating the content, but mainly we focus on the reviewing the condominium, the project in Ho Chi Minh City, and also we providing the service to support the client. So it's very nice to have it here again and direct meeting like this to talk about the very interesting topic these days.
Okay, very good, Nhan. So the first topic I would like us to discuss is mostly about the macroeconomic environment, right? We had not so good signals about Western countries. They start to talk about some recession in the US. In Europe is the same, like people are not so optimistic about the next upcoming trimester and then years. What would be your thoughts about Vietnam macroeconomic environment? I'm thinking about inflation, I'm thinking about raising price of commodities, oil, etc. that impacts the Vietnamese real estate market?
Yeah, so it's a very big question, I would say, but I trying to be narrow down it into a very general index that people can take it come along with this video. So we're talking about the macro economy of Vietnam until now. So we have been through 3 quarters of this year, and according to the newest update from the World Bank Group about the Vietnamese economy, that we are seeing that we still have a very optimistic number about the recovery of the country after the 2 years like 2019, 2020, and even in the 2021 with the COVID impact. So within this year, we are very successful in still maintaining the growing of the GDP, somewhere number around like 7.5%, and it's still in the top country in the Southeast Asian of the growing speed. And also at the same time, you mentioned about the US, you mentioned about the European country, which is facing to the inflation increasing highest in history in the last 20 years. In Vietnam, we having the same impact, but the government is still trying to control the number of the inflation is somewhere around like 3.8% this year. And this will be impact directly with the strategy for the upcoming year in 2023, where the government will try to hold this number and try to keep it stable as much as possible, and this could be bring the reducing of the GDP up around somewhere like 6.3 to 6.5% forecast in next year. And lastly, we are talking about the CPI, where the CPI is still maintained in a good number around like 3.8% according to World Bank, of course, and this number will be forecast will be increasing in next year just around like 4%. And lastly, I want to have a highly mention in this question is about the stock market in Vietnamese. In 2022, we reached the first 1,000 point index, and this year we have a very good recovery in the first 6 months. But in the after July is coming into right now, the market seems to be not really good. Not just only in Vietnam, we are seeing the same thing happen with the Dow Jones index in US, and it seems to be as the time that everything is dropping down for a while.
Okay, so very big slowdown global, and as well just basically it impacts Vietnam because Vietnam is a manufacturing land, right? We have a lot of factories here. We have a lot of factories from China that are relocating to Vietnam that is boosting Vietnam economy, but it still impacts in a way that everything is correlated, right? The less money is printed everywhere, the less money is going into Vietnam economy, the less is gonna give some dynamism for Vietnam as well.
Of course, the inflation is impact on every angle of the society living. So, but your mention about the manufacturing actually is happening quite different with what we are thinking in our head. So with the manufacturing, this trend have been increasing up since the trade war between the American and China, where most of the big manufacturers in the world, they are going out and seeking another location to relocate their factory. And Vietnam seems to be one of the hottest spot during the 2020 until right now. And with our newest update from the market, we have the Lego company who has been opened one of their very biggest factory in Southeast Asia. And just 2 days ago, we have the news update from the Coca-Cola. They just opened a new factory. It's also one of the biggest factory in the Southeast Asia in Long An. So nowadays, a lot of the company, the factory, they are seeking to relocate their factory. And a lot of people my friend who is my co-worker in Sevel, they're working for the industrial consultant. They are very busy these days with helping the company who is seeking for the new location for their factory. But also at the same time, that is from the FDI, right? So the foreigner direct invest, so move into Vietnam because it's more attracting the stable life of the government, the growing wealth, and a peaceful country, and a good environment support from the government. But on the other hand, we are facing at the individual client a lot of difficulty this year. So since the middle of the 2022, the bank had just increased the rate for the saving. So it's attract the people to bring the money to get it into the saving bank account rather than to keep investing. And on the other hand, at the same time, they're increasing the rate for the debt for the company. So for example, I am working for a developer. We are finding the difficulty to engage ourselves with the supportment leverage from the bank because of the high rate. And also because they're during this tough time that a lot of people using the leverage for the real estate investment, and that causing the reason why the bank is tighten the loan for the real estate segment during this term of time.
So basically what you are saying is that as an individual, before you could borrow money to buy real estate, to speculate, because all the price of real estate have been like going so high and increasing very fast over the last 5 years probably.
Yes.
So of course some people were smart enough to make a loan in the bank even if the interest was high, to buy a land or to buy an apartment, to buy different types of property, and to finally pay back their loan. And then still make good profits. And now what the bank is doing is that they're gonna tighten and restrict.
They restrict.
Can make a loan, and they will only allow people who wanna make a loan for their residential area, right?
But actually, this is the fact it happened right now. Most of the bank is run out of the room of the credit. So that means no more money to be sent it out to the market for the individual buying the property. Not just only in the real estate segment, but also in the other field, like car is another example. For many years ago, you just only 20% of the price of a car to purchase a car. But now, because of the limit of the room of credit, so you have to be in the waiting list so long that wait until have the room back and then you can borrow the money to buy it. So it's happened the same with the real estate, but in the real estate, it's much more restricted because it's a bigger value and it's bring more higher risk for the bank. So they are very restricted, and we are estimated this trend can last until this next year, in the middle of next year. So it will be around. We are waiting for until the June of 2023 to see if any new update. And one of the very interesting update that I figured out, because nowadays when I'm working as a developer, I have more chance to work and engage our partnership with the bank. And if we look at back our videos that we mentioned about how the foreigner to invest in Vietnam, I used to mention that when you are a foreigner and you invest to buy a property in Vietnam, you are not allowed to asking the loan from the local bank accounts in Vietnam, right? And even for the international bank like the Standard Chartered or SHBC, that they are not also providing that kind of services for the foreigner buyer. But during the time when I working in this field last year, I recognized that there is a very interesting information that the Shinhan Bank is a Korean bank. They are providing the loan for the foreigner buyer. Of course, there will be priority for the Korean buyer. So if any of your audience is Korean, this information might be very helpful. So Shinhan, they provide a very competitive rate loan for the foreigner buyer if they can follow to the procedure and the document requirement from the bank, and they will providing you the loan for the real estate.
So Nhan, in terms of loan, because some foreigners may have their foreign perspective on doing a loan in France, for instance, you can get a loan for 1 to 2%. What is the rate in average in Vietnam if you want to make a loan to a bank to buy real estate, for instance?
So you will be surprised when I say this number at the beginning, because it's way too far with what happened in Europe. So normally the rate for the loan for Vietnamese, so they will have the base and the add-on, right? So the base is around somewhere like 9%, and will be the add-on 2 or 3%, depends on the market time. That is for Vietnamese. So that means that the average rate for a loan for a property in Vietnam somewhere around like 10 to 12% per year. So this is very high comparing with the European country, but you have to consider about the pattern and the characteristic of the two different markets. In Vietnam, real estate is investment field, is investment channel, but it's different from France or any other Europe country. Real estate is not purely investment purpose anymore. But if you're a foreigner and you are using the services and the rate from the foreigner bank, it will be a lot more attractive rate better than Vietnamese bank. For example, if Vietnamese, the base will be 9%, but for the foreigner with the Shinhan, at the moment when I check it, was 7% base, so lower than 2%, because with the local the global system in the world, they can have the global money, they can take the global fund and the capital from the other country, and they take a different in the rate, so they can providing you very good rate.
Okay, so interesting, Nhan. So if you guys want to make a loan, you should check with the international bank. You may have some provider in the future that will be able to support you to make a loan to let you buy real estate. So this is the first point. Basically, banks are tightening in general their policy, and they make things more regulated and more restricted. Now, the second point that I have been through last year is also on the notary side. Before, you could buy a real estate, you go to the notary, and when at the notary office you sign the sales purchase agreement, and finally you make everything proper, right, to have the transfer, you could just tell them the price, effective price, right? And from this price, you will pay your own personal income tax.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit what is have been changing very recently?
All right. So as Guillaume mentioned that, for example, we will take a very clear number, then you can have a good imagination about what has happened. So before the changing of the 2022, so if you buy a property from the developer with the price like 10 billion, and then you resell that property for the other buyer with the price like 12 billion. So you take the balance is 2 billion, right? But when you go to the notaries, like you mentioned, you just only signed up the transaction price between you and the next buyer, just like the original price, 10 billion. And then they will calculate the tax, the personal income tax, 2% on that 10 billion. So you totally don't have to pay the tax for the increasing. So nowadays you just cannot do that anymore. So the law has been updated, and they have to be very restricted in this one. So you have to really write down the real transaction price. So that means if you resell it with 12 billion or 15 billion, you have to really write it down. And this will be impact directly with your income when you have to pay a higher tax on your real amount money that you earn. However, this is not that is not completely a disadvantage for real estate buyer. So according to my experience, when I were working with a Korean client, when you sell the property in Korean, you just not only pay the personal income tax, but you have to pay something called the profitable tax. So they will make the tax on your profits. So if you buy 10 billion at the original price and you resell it at 12, you increase 2, right? And they will take like 35 to 40% on that 2 billion. But in Vietnam right now, we still not have anything called a profitable tax. Yeah. So that means you just only have to pay the personal income tax. And this is very, very advantageous for the foreigner who is seeking for the real estate investment opportunity in this country.
So basically, to give you an idea, you have 2% personal income tax on the sales price.
Yes.
You will have 0.5%, I mean, just a few cents in percent for the transfer tax. And
Yes.
then-
Normally, it's just like $1,000
Yeah.
back for the notary fees we
yeah.
call.
So you can just count in global like 3%. It's gonna include your personal income tax, the transfer fee that you have to pay on the authority side to transfer the title from one person to one person, and then the notary fee that's gonna be charged as well.
And lately will be the agent fee, of course, if
Yeah.
you're looking for the agents in here.
Okay, so that Nyan is about the notary side. Then there will be also other updates. It was more about if you used to be very willing to buy and sell real estate before, let's say. You know Vietnam real estate market for 5-10 years. You knew how liquid it was. You could just flip,
Yeah.
right? So you buy a land, you flip it. You buy an apartment, you flip it. How is the situation right now? Is it that easy to buy, wait a couple of months, like 6 months, and then sell again?
All right, so we are talking about flipping. This is the one of the term that we are avoiding to say it. Even this is one of our code of conduct that we are not really mention about the flip term with our client, because that is very risky, or otherwise that we say speculation is a very risky for the investor. Firstly, we want to mention about the primary market. Is the market that the seller was the developer and the buyer is the final consumer. So according to the Savills report on the 2022, we are seeing the very first time that the absorption rate has been under 80% from the primary market. It's still having high demand out there, but also we have a very low from the supplier, especially focused on the luxury segment, and this causing the low absorption rate. So since 2019 until now, this is the first time I see that the absorption rate lower than 80%. So that means if 3 years ago when you go to the sale launch, then it's always having the same result that everything is sold out. Nowadays it's not happening like that anymore. It still have the stock left in the inventory. And the nearest day when I check on the report from the Cushman and Wakefield, that they showing that from 2019 until now is 3 years past, the number of the absorption rate is only about like under 70%. So that means you see, firstly, on the primary market, then the absorption rate is not that good enough. And secondly, in the secondary market, it's just not that easy for you to flip, because if you are choosing not a really hot prospect and hot location like Two Team or District 1, you're going to be facing very, very difficult exit strategy if you want to resell your property. And that is the reason why. And as I mentioned before, that because the restriction in the loan and leverage provider from the bank, that will be also impact directly on the secondary market, because nowadays the people cannot asking the loan from the bank to buy the other property from the other buyer, the previous buyer anymore. So they will very hesitated to decide whether if they want to buy the secondary house in the secondary market when they don't have any leverage, any support from the bank.
Yeah, because it was still used in Vietnam to, let's say you have some assets, you wanna sell to buy other assets, you can make a small loan, right, that can last for a couple of months, to just help you to do the transition. But if now it's hard to get that loan, people will be more willing to sell first before buying. So it's gonna basically pressure the price down, right?
So we are mentioning about the whether if the price will be dropping down, right? So people, this is one of the biggest concern of most the owner, the landlord right now who having their property in their pocket, whether the price will be dropping down. So here is the situation. So our situation nowadays is quite different from the 2008, where the bubbles crashed on the 2008 and 2013, because nowadays that in 2008, so people are aggressive buying even then when they don't have the cash in their pocket. So if you want to buy a house with 10 billion and they have only 3 billion, equal to 30%, they willingly to asking the loan, the leverage from the bank. And when the market is stopped growing, and then they cannot sell their property in the secondary market, and they also don't have the money to pay the debt and the rate for the bank, so they have to resell their property with a dropping price. And when this situation happen in a big scale, is creating the collapse of the real estate market. But nowadays, with the restriction and of course the experience from the bank, the investor, the buyer, they're much more selective, much more intelligent in the way they choose to purchase the property. They only asking the loan when they already have the cash in their pocket. So that means even they have 10 billion, they still want to ask for the loan to buy it, so they can still keep the cash, and then they maximize the opportunity to reinvest that number of cash for many different fields to maximize the investment opportunity. So that's why people are not really being pushed for selling out their property with a dropping price. But we don't refuse and we don't deny the situation happen out there. There are still a number of people who get in really trouble with the debt from the bank. The one who because you know that real estate is just one of very many different investment channel, like stock, like bond, like real estate, and many different. And now that we have the cryptocurrency as well. And when the people they share the money into many pockets like that, and when the stock is dropping down, and the money is stuck in the stock already, so they're getting in trouble to have to pay the debt and the rate from the market, and this causing the very struggle situation, financial situation for the buyer. And also this can be some of the buyer will take advantage by this state to find the seller who really aggressive want to sell out their property to assist the market and take back the cash.
So from your perspective, Nhan, even if for some people they will have to sell their properties under the market,
Yep.
Because it's not on the global scale,
Yep.
the bubble won't explode this year, right?
Yeah, so we don't confirm anything like whether the bubble will explode or not, because it's very risky, and it's the investor is seeing this and say, yeah, there's going to be a bubble explosion, and then nobody wants to invest, right? But however, we want to say this, in every scenario that we always have the risk and the opportunity at the same time. So, and even the Warren Buffett, he said, have to be greedy when people are afraid. So even in the downtrend market, even for both stock or the real estate market, I think this is a good time for you to find a real value property. Because if you're a long-term investor, you have enough cash, you don't need to use the leverage from the bank, and you want to really find a good property with a good developer, good management team, good operator, this is a very good time to find it. For example, I see you are doing a video with a project in District 1. So that project is a very good project in Ho Chi Minh City, estimated by myself, because they are developed by a foreigner developer, which is very reputable company. Also, they have a good location, very limited number, good quality of the handover. But on the 2019, when they do selling on the peak time of the market, the price is so high. But now, when the market is seems to be going like stable on the side, they try to maintain in the affordable price for you, and not really much change comparing with the 2019 price. So that means when you enter into the market right now, you can really purchase a very good property with a very good price, and things are bringing it back to the real value of it. So it's not being overrated by the heat from the market. And I think if you are a very selective and wise investor, this is a very good time to jump into the market do a very good research, a good consultants, and you can really find a good deals at the time.
Yeah, actually, every time there will be slowdown, there will be some kind of chaotic time, you will have two mindset of people, right? You have the people that got scared and then want to sell absolutely, and you have, I would say, the smart people who are gonna just analyze, see how things are going, and if they are comfortable and if they make their plan and they adjust their budget carefully, they can buy, as you say, at a discounted price, right?
Yes.
And then when you will look back 5 years after, you will see that buying at that price, sometimes it's a bottom. We see during COVID time, when finally the stock market crashed for a couple of weeks, people who were smart enough to enter at that price got a very discounted price, and after 6 months, a year, finally they got a 30% price under the market, right?
Yes. So in the end of the day, then we are all the investor, right? So I think that the only thing that helps us to distinguish the investor and the speculator is all about the time. The term of time will be decided whether you are investor or you're a speculator. So real estate is going to be always be, to me, is a long-term investment. It has to be a good product to create the value. If you just bought the house in Vietnam and you want to rent it out to make the cash flow every month with 4 or 5% of the rental yield, is still a very good income rate comparing with the other country right now, even with a well-developed like Korean or Japan, where the rate from the bank is minus, and then you still can make the cash and you can still can have your property with the capital gain every year, then it's still a very good deal. As long as that you can very satisfying what you are looking for in the property market at the moment. You want a long term or the mid term, you just want to do a quick flipping. Then if you are having full of the resort and of course doing well research, and especially that if you have the good consultant come along with you to providing the information, update, give you a good data and analyze it and help you to make a good decision, then I think that you can easily to make the profit in Vietnamese market.
Okay, very interesting. So you learned the lesson from Nhan. If you are just considering flipping it, maybe it's not the good time to do it right now because everything is a bit struggling. But if you are thinking long term, just come to Vietnam. Now it's very easy to come to Vietnam with an e-visa for foreigners. You can check a bit what is the real estate market, benchmark the options, and then see what type of project you'll be be suitable with your investment plan.
We never get rich by flipping, for sure. Flipping is never be one of our options. As me, when I was the consultant, I never suggest for my client the flipping option, because you know that for all the successful investors in the world, we have the Warren Buffett, we have the Bernard Arnault from the LVMH. They always say that when I look into the investment, I look for 10 or 20 years. So if you really can look like them, then you can win by buying anything in Vietnamese. Like you just buy it there, and then 5 years later, absolutely will be increasing.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Nhan, for your insights today. You can probably check below in the description. We will leave some links, some resources if you want to learn more about Vietnam real estate market. It was a pleasure to have you today to get some fresh updates about what is happening right now. I think it's going to help the foreign investor to have a look and have a really insider perspective from people who are really working on a day-to-day basis on real estate.
And don't forget to click like and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Down and I'ma get it right. Then I'll sight like